All right. All right. Welcome to Coach P's Corner. Thank you for joining us today. And we have a first-time podcaster today in Richard Higa. He is the assistant coach and recruiting coordinator at Hawaii Pacific University. Same place you played, and just arrived in Dallas. So we were finally able to make the timing work out where I think Hawaii is what, 5 hours behind?
Yeah, 5 hours, so a little tough to
And
hop on a podcast at the same time.
Well, we made it work, and very grateful for the conversation we're about to have. Um, Kind of interesting. We don't actually know each other, so this will be kind of fun.
Yeah,
I know we followed each other on Twitter for a little bit, but and have a mutual friend in Connor Watson, and I'm going to force him to listen to this too. So, um, but without further ado, man, why don't you just tell us kind of about your background and where you're from, your playing career, and just so we can get to know you a little bit.
yeah, for sure. So my name's Richard Higa. I am the assistant coach, recruiting coordinator, also like player development coordinator. I have a lot of different hats. Playing for a small budget D2 school as the assistant coach, you have a lot of things got to take care of. I mean, I wouldn't have asked for anything more at this point in my coaching career. So, see, a little bit about myself. So, pretty much lived in Hawaii my entire life. I was actually born in Maryland, out of all places. But my dad's from Hawaii, my mom's from Hawaii. But I was born in Maryland because my dad was stationed there for the military for a little bit. So yeah. For those who know about Hawaii and baseball, like the baseball culture is really, really strong in Hawaii. For me, actually, I had a really unique upbringing in the baseball community in Hawaii. So normally, how it works is it works everywhere normally. You grew up playing like at a young age, 4 or 5 years old, you grow up with the kids in your community, you go to little league, you move up the ranks, you go to high school, just around the same group of people. But for me, I actually grew up on a military base in Hawaii, so I wasn't really exposed to the community side of baseball at the time, and my skills developed really late in my career. My dad played baseball at the Air Force Academy. He's from Hawaii. He ended up going there just because it was his only chance to get off the island. I mean, they paid to go to school there, so that was the way on. He was a walk on. I'm at that school. Had a better college career than me, so that's unfortunate. And he played in Division One, and I didn't, so I was like, all right, respect. But yeah, so that's pretty much my upbringing. Baseball career, like I said, it was really unique. I was a really bad baseball player for majority of my career. My dad was really good, but growing up, he was in the military, worked a lot, and he actually would coach my teams on base. But at the time, because the leagues on base were really behind, because most of those kids had never played baseball before, so they're kind of just there
Mhm.
doing their thing. So my dad's teaching us at 10, 11, 12 years old like the fundamentals you should know at like 5, 6, 7. So my skills kind of didn't really progress well at that age. So then when I moved off base and I went to the school, this middle school and high school I got accepted to. My skills were just really behind. I was like the worst player. It was a big shock to me. And also didn't help that at that age, we play intermediate level baseball. So seventh and eighth grade, we actually play on like the 90-foot bases, like the big ones, and it's called like
Mhm.
our 15U league. And I was a late born, so I was 11, 12 years old trying to play on the 90-foot bases, and I was terrible at baseball. So just everything just like wasn't working out for me. But I was really thankful. Like I have very supportive parents. My dad understood that a lot of my growth in baseball was stunted because he wasn't able to give me what my grandfather, his dad, was able to give him growing up. So he was very supportive, very patient. And yeah, so I go into middle school. So the school that I played for, it was a really small school in Hawaii. It's called University Laboratory School. We actually played with a bunch of other small private schools. So we had like five schools that made up one like middle school team and a high school team. I was so bad that we won, I think, one game the year prior, and I got cut from the team in seventh grade. And that's how bad I was to get cut from a team that had one win. So, but that moment, I was, I think, 11, I think I was 11 or 12 years old. And my dad just asked me, he's like, hey, like, is this what you want to do? Like, do you want to play baseball? Because we're at the point where you're so far behind that it's going to take like a lot of work. And he told me, it was like, this might take years for you to match up to your peers. And I was like, yeah, like, I think I can do this. And the biggest thing was like, I didn't know what that was supposed to look like. I didn't know what it was supposed to look like to actually play at that level. But like, my dad always saw it in me. He was always very supportive, always told me like if you put in the work, like you'll get there. So from that day on, I mean, it was training 5, 6 days a week from seventh grade until I was 23 years old. Um, I would train on my I would get home from school. If we didn't have practice, I would hit on my own in the backyard, and then I wait for him to come home at like 5 o'clock. We go to the field together, do all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so from then on, I made the middle school team in eighth grade. I got like one at bat. We go into junior varsity. The only reason I got to play junior varsity is because our second baseman got pulled up to varsity, and I started all 15 games because I could play some defense at second, but I had one hit. I had one hit in 15 games. So my first 3 years of baseball experience at a competitive level was I got cut. I had one at bat and I had one hit. So yeah, so all these things,
Wow.
like, it's a lot of like just it's a long story for me. And it helps me explain like my coaching I guess career, my coaching style, like my path through baseball kind of explains it. So yeah, so that'll happen. That was only up to my freshman year of
Yeah.
high school.
Yeah,
So
well,
then
and that's
yeah.
that's exactly why we're doing this. Like, I think it's important for part of the reason I started doing this is one to kind of help uh, learn some new things and expand my network and things like that, but also to hear different stories, right? Because I think relatively speaking, you have a unique experience. And so I apologize for interrupting, but why don't you continue on where you left off? I think this is it's pretty fun to hear for the first time, honestly.
Oh yeah, no, that's why I appreciate you bringing me on because like not a lot of people like don't know my story, especially now that I'm a coach. A lot of my close friends from college, like they all know what I had to go through as a player, but I agree, like it's good because my biggest thing is I just want people that were similar to me that had my experience or even going through right now, like they can see somebody that went through and came out the other side kind of all right. So yeah,
Mhm.
so a big thing that happened too was I was severely undersized growing up. My freshman year of high school, I'll never forget. So we had like PE class up in high school and we had to like weigh in and in the spring. I remember the spring of my freshman year, I was 5 feet tall, 90 pounds. I was very small. So it didn't help that I was undersized and I was a late bloomer. So I graduated high school at 17. So I was a November born.
Okay.
So I was late bloomer. I was pushed ahead. Like all these factors just didn't add up really well for me. So I go into my sophomore year of high school. I hit my growth spurt finally. I was like 5'8", 120 pounds maybe. So I hit a huge growth spurt that time. I started on JV. I hit a lot better. I think I hit like above 300 for the first time in my life. But still, like I struggle with a lot of like performance anxiety, and I didn't know this is a thing until I think until I was 21, 22 years old that I realized I had these issues like with anxiety in baseball because I was always like the worst player. And then when you're
Yeah.
finally like good enough to perform, people just expect that you can do it. But it's like I have the tools. I know I have the tools, but I'm still learning at 15 years old. Like, how do I even compete? Like, I used to
Yeah.
just get fed fastballs all the time because people not gonna hit. So it's like now it's like, oh, I can hit, and I'm getting like first pitch bangers. I'm like, I don't know how to hit this. So yeah, so that happened like my sophomore year. I did well. I got put up to varsity for the state tournament, so that was a really cool accomplishment for me. And then junior year, I was actually supposed to be so I'm on varsity now. My junior year, I was supposed to be the backup second baseman. And one preseason game, my head coach threw me at third base, and I did well. And he's like, like let's just leave you there. Let's just play you there. And then um, that's how it went. I ended up starting my junior year of high school at third base. Had a good year, made all conference. And I was like, man, like maybe I can actually do this. And then my senior year, we had a new coach. We had a new coach come in, and like similar, or it's a very common theme. So what happens is, I get a new coach, and then they see the tools that I have. So by that time, I was 5'10", 130 pounds. But I remember the one thing I could do at that age is I could swing it pretty well. I could hit the ball hard. I went to a showcase in summer 2016. So I'll be going into my senior year. And that's right when like the data side of baseball started coming in. So I
Mhm.
remember there's a booth, like there's like a hit tracks cage at the time, and this was like a pretty big showcase. They had like 100 something players, but I remember my peak exit velocity at the time was like 90 miles per hour, and I was like a buck 30. Like I was super
Yeah.
skinny, and I had one of the highest peak exit velocities I would flip for my position. And then it's kind of when I knew I was like, oh, maybe I can hit the ball kind of hard. So I go into my senior year. The expectation is I'm going to be like one of the best hitters in our conference, like kind of lead our team. And then I started off hot, had 4 or 5 hits in our first 2 games, and then I got cold, went 0 for 10, and then, my coaching staff kind of lost faith in me. I got benched a couple times, and every time I got benched, we'd be losing, and I had to come in and pinch hit, and then I would either tie or win the game, and just like this is back and forth, like playing like these mind games. And, just like I understood why, like it's frustrating. Like you see a player with talent, you want them to succeed, but then I just wish like at that time you ask the player like, why do you feel like you're struggling? And for me, it was like I just had a bad approach, A, but B, it's like I struggled a lot with like confidence and just anxiety playing baseball. So yeah, so come to the end of my senior year, after all that, I ended up having an even better year than my junior year and didn't even sniff all conference for some reason, and that was kind of that. So yeah, so I graduated high school in 2017, and at the time, recruiting in Hawaii was a lot. I'd say it was a lot harder. Exposure. I graduated like right before like social media exposure like became a thing,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, and then like 5'10", 135 pounds, like no one knows who I am. So
Hmm.
I got a very actually there's one school that recruited me. It's a small NAI school in California called Menlo College. Um,
Hmm.
at the time, their head coach was Jake McKinley, who's now the head coach at Nevada Reno, and the person who recruited me was Dane Fujinaka, who's actually my head coach now. Was my
Yeah.
head coach, and I'll get back to that story later. But he was the only coach to recruit me in high school, and unfortunately, I
Wow.
couldn't go because I didn't have enough money. It was an expensive school, so yeah. So that's a funny story for later. But basically, what happened at HPU was I applied, I got in, got a lot of academic aid, and then I ran into the pitching coach at like an open house at the school, and I emailed the head coach a billion times, probably wanted to play there and walk on, and never got back to me. So I told the pitching coach, like, hey, like I really want to come, like I'm already admitted, I'm coming to the school, and he's like, oh, like here's our recruiting coordinator's number. So I texted the recruiting coordinator, asked the head coach for me if I could walk on, and he's like, yeah, you're good. So that's in like May of 2017 when I graduate, and then I
Hmm.
don't hear anything else until the day before our first meeting. I get a text in August. He's like, hey, we have a meeting tomorrow. It's like, all right, sick. So I go through all of that. And then I show up to practice the first day, and the head coach is like, oh, sorry, who are you again? Yeah, so that was my so now we're getting to
Tough.
the college, yeah, the college stuff. And so I had 3 head coaches in college. My first head coach was Garrett Yukamoto. He coaches at Hawaii Hilo now. I'm forever indebted to him for giving me a chance to play college baseball. Yeah, like I agree. Like I didn't belong at the Division 2 level. Like I was undersized, undertooled. The only tool I had was I could kind of hit for power, but it had to be a fastball on the middle that I ran into. Couldn't really play defense. Just all these things, and it, like long story short, that first year I worked as hard as I could because I knew like any day I could just get cut. And I remember he told me after my I redshirted that year, and he told me he's like, man, like yeah, we're just gonna cut you. But he said that I wanted it more than anybody else there. And which I do believe, like that was my only shot at playing college baseball. I was like, this is all I have. Like I can't really afford to leave. So I'm just gonna like kind of bust my butt and hopefully get better. So yeah, that's the red shirt season for me. And it's crazy just talking about it now because I realize how long like the story goes. It just keeps going and
That's
going and going, but
awesome.
it gets better. Like I tell you, it gets better. It's funny. So that happens, and then I go play summer ball in Omaha, Nebraska, and just so happens that somebody I know in the future down the line is also from Omaha, Nebraska.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, so that's I'll say that story for when we get to when we get to Watson. But yeah, so I go play in Omaha. It's my first time with consistent playing time in college, and summer ball is a vibe where it's just like there's no pressure. You just like can be yourself. I had a really good season up there. Probably the best offensive season I had up to that point. Um, made the All-Star team up there. We came back from a 15-1 deficit in the championship game and won. We won 20 to
Wow.
19. It was like the most fun I've ever had playing baseball. I went like I was saying really well. Then like 0 for 21 when my dad came up to watch. And like, of course, I go 0 for 21 when my dad's here. And immediately as soon as he leaves, I get like 10 hits in the playoffs. I'm like, oh my gosh, of course. Like this is always how it goes, man. But yeah, so I come back to school. I have a new head coach, the former recruiting coordinator, Dallas Correa. So that was my second head coach. He comes in, kind of revamps the team. Initially, I was slotted to be like the 1B to our second baseman's 1A. He was a returning starter. But then they brought in a JUCO second baseman in the fall or in the winter during the break. And, I kind of just got shuffled out of out of the depth chart, which I mean it happens. I feel like I did everything I could to give myself a shot to play, and I didn't sniff the field until this one doubleheader, the last game before our road trip. We were struggling, and my head coach just threw me in left field, and then first career start had 2 hits, and then I got brought on the road trip just because of that. Like it was a really cool experience for
Wow.
me because like I felt like for the first time like I belong at this level, and we ended up winning that game. It was like really good vibes. I go on the road trip, and then first pitch I faced the road trips like the 6'8" righty from Concordia Irvine throwing like 94. I'm like, oh, this is great. And then like I go for two, I fly out, I strike out, I get benched and get one at bat the rest of the season. Like that's just how it
Wow.
goes. Yeah. So as much as it was unfortunate, I was like, I gave it my best shot, and you gotta do what you gotta do. Coaching staff's gotta play who they gotta play, and unfortunately, that wasn't in the cards for me. So second year or my first year of college baseball after playing, I went 2 for 7, 2 for 7,
Mhm.
and that was that. So after that season, one thing that was interesting was actually during the summer of 2018, when I was in Omaha, I met a guy who was throwing these weighted balls around. And I was like, what are these weighted balls? And I was like, oh, like this company called Driveline makes them. So that's when I started digging into it. Because at the time, I never knew like about player development. Player development wasn't really a
Yeah.
thing back in the day. I mean, back in the day, it's like 6 years ago
Seven
for
years
me.
ago. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
So, so yeah, like I read about them. Like a lot of stuff they wrote about wasn't even like the stuff they taught, but it's about like the people they were. It's like wanting to get the most out of yourself, wanting to like push the issue as far as you can. Like for me, it was like I wasn't gifted with much as a player. Like I didn't grow up with the best skills and the best tools, but it's like I knew that I wanted to be great, and I wanted to like basically get everything that I could out of myself. So like my parents, luckily, they could help me. It helped that we saved money that I stayed home, so they were able to help me go up to Driveline in 2019, and that's kind of when they were still in the original facility. Like it was really small, but when I went there, like I tell you, like that was the best experience of my life. Like
Mhm.
being around people who were just like me, who wanted to be great, who a lot of them were, kind of the guys who were kicked to the side, didn't have the best stuff, but they loved the game, they loved the process, and they wanted to find ways to be better. So, and that was also the first time I ever was told like you're a good player. Like I had tools. Like I was always told like something was missing. I was always told it was my hitting, my defense, my running, or something. But then you go up to Driveline, you meet these guys who are Division 1 players, former professional players. They're like, so how'd you do this year? I'm like, I had 7 at bats. And they're like, why? I'm like, I don't know. They're like, you're more than capable of performing at that level. So yeah, so I made it out there, and then we come back to school. Fall 2019, I have a good fall, and then spring 2020 rolls around and COVID hits, right?
Mhm.
But during that COVID season, I probably hit like the all-time low for me was I once again spring of my sophomore year. So this is my third year in college, sophomore year because I redshirted. Wasn't a starter again. Didn't really get many opportunities. Just would pinch hit or playing late in games, and then um, at the end of our first homestand, like I found that I didn't make road trip. So I didn't make road trip as a third year player, and it's like, dang, like that's tough. I've put in all this work. I've gotten better. Like I know I can perform at this level, and then you don't make road trip, and it's like, wow, like that's really unfortunate. But then what happened was COVID hit while we were in the mainland. So we were in Oakland, the team was, and I was at home, and COVID hit, and it was a mess. Like it was I felt really bad
Yeah.
for them, but I was lucky I was at home, and yeah. So luckily I have one of my best friends. His name is Brooks Horton. Tall Holly boy. He was one of my best friends from college, and best friends from childhood, and we had trained together. So once COVID hit, we both decided like like we're gonna grind this thing out. Like we're gonna get better. Like we had a lot of restrictions in Hawaii. So one way we kind of got around it is I would just drive over to his house, and he had like a bullpen space so we could hit and we could throw at his
Mhm.
house. And we just did that for a couple months until things opened back up, and then yeah, so the timeline keeps going. Fall 2020, I showed back up to school. Same old, same old. I had a great fall. Going to the spring, bottom of the depth chart. It's like same things happen. And then, but this season, the really interesting thing about 2021 is we had our season was only 4 games against Division 1 University of Hawaii at Manoa, and then 16 games against University of Hawaii Hilo. That was our entire season.
Oh.
because
Oh,
we weren't allowed to we didn't travel from Cali to Hawaii because of COVID issues. So we had pods in our conference. So we played Hilo a bunch of times, and I was riding the bench. And then one day we were like 2-9 or something. So then I got to start, had 3 hits my first start, and then just rolled from there. Ended up hitting like 367 that season. Um, had a couple triples. Like just had for the first time ever, I felt like this is what I've been waiting for. Like this is
hmm
the player I was meant to be. And I made all conference at the college level, and just had a really good year. And then I was very fortunate to finally get the opportunity because I knew that like I had earned it. Just slaving
hmm
away at being a bench player, but like telling yourself it's like once you get that chance, you got to go. Like you got to ride with it. And I did. I really made the most of it. And yeah, so that was the end of my 2021 season. I graduated that year with my undergraduates, and I was very fortunate. So my head coach at the time, Dallas Carrera, he left. He got a job at University of Hawaii at Manoa, but luckily he left me with a good amount of scholarship money that actually covered majority of my grad school. So like that was one thing
Awesome.
that was like a really big blessing for me that my parents, because like I was contemplating like, do I even want to keep playing baseball? Because like maybe this is my peak and I don't want to put my parents through paying for grad school too or taking out loans. But then when I got the
hmm
scholarship, I was like, shoot, like my 2 years of grad school is gonna be cheaper than 1 year of undergrad.
Yeah.
So it's like
Okay.
let's try it out. So that worked out for me. And then because COVID hit and I had my redshirt year, I had 2 years left after I finished my undergrad. So luckily I finished school on
Okay.
time because I just spread out my master's degree for 2 years. So then 2022 comes around. Dane Fujinaka gets hired as my new head coach, and I'm like ecstatic because I knew like we've known each other for a while, and um, yeah, I mean 2022 came around. I had a solid year as a full time starter, but this is starting to where this started to happen where I started noticing almost like it was my ceiling as a player was because because I told you how like back in the store in the beginning I was always a bad player, so I never
hmm
developed like the approach or like the mindset of always being challenged by pitchers.
Right.
So when I started facing the better pitchers in our conference, the Azusa Pacifics, the Point Loma, we have 5 6 pitchers that are signed professionally every year from our conference. I would always like struggle against the top tier talent because like these guys can just out pitch me. And unfortunately, like I feel like that's the one thing I never was able to overcome. Also because I spent my summer training at Driveline. So 2021, 2022, I went to Driveline. For me, that was the gamble I was willing to take. Like I felt like I wanted my tools to be in a place to give myself a chance to play baseball as long as I could. And I think I did have the tools, but it was just my inability to really beat the better pitchers in our conference. And yeah, so that was really on me, but didn't have a bad year or anything. I hit 285 my junior year, and then this last year I just finished. I had my arguably I think it was my best season I played. I hit 296, had my first 2 career home runs. It took me
Yeah.
till I was 23, my 6 year of grad school, but or 6 year of school, but hit my first 2 career home runs of my entire life actually that were in a real game. I hit home runs
hmm
in fall ball, hit home runs in summer ball, but I was like, this one is like legit,
It
legit.
actually
So that was
counts.
a really yeah, these count. These count. They're in the stat books. So
Yeah.
yeah, so at the end of my playing career, that was that. I finished. I had a career batting average of 300. Like I was a solid player, and sometimes we always think like, oh, we could have done this, we could have done that, it could have been better. Like I really take a step back. It's like like I really did like everything I could, and I think the player I became was
Yeah.
like I was really happy about the person I became. So I was like, I'm okay with hanging it up now.
That's
Yeah.
awesome to hear because I mean when I've had Watson on the podcast twice now and um we always talk about how it's important to recognize that the things you do for yourself, right? And a lot of people kind of get hung up on performance and all that and maybe you reach your ceiling, maybe you didn't, but um to to hear that story from start to finish is like, yeah, well, you did pretty good, all things considered, you know. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And you talked about a lot of good stuff in there, right? Like performance anxiety, for example, which is something that um, this is episode 10 of this podcast. We haven't really talked really anything about that. And so if you could just maybe give us some thoughts on how you I don't know how you work through that, how you handle that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it was actually interesting because I didn't really realize I dealt with this until I overcame it in a way. So I think it was probably my senior season that I finally like realized that I overcame it because like when I would go up to bat, like for majority of my life, like my heart would be racing. Like I could feel like my heart's like pumping like through my chest. And like I just thought that was normal. I thought everybody experienced that. But it's like no, like not like that's like not normal. And like I just remember like not like I would like look at my hands and then my hands would be like shaking when I'd be hitting. I'm like why is this happening? But I think a big thing for me was kind of understanding like why I was like a player in the first place and why I was doing this whole thing, especially my senior year. Like kind of knowing like unless I had like an all-American season, I wasn't gonna be playing more baseball. So my big thing was like it wasn't for me. Like I wanted to win like for my friends and like perform for them. And I think it helped me be very at peace knowing like I did like absolutely everything I could. Like
Mhm.
I sacrificed pretty much, well, I wouldn't call it like a sacrifice. I remember listening somewhere like it's not necessarily a sacrifice, but it's more like an opportunity. I gave myself every opportunity possible to be the best player I could be. And like knowing that, it's like, why worry? Because like you did everything you could. So I think that really helped me my senior year. Because I actually had a tough senior year at one point. I got benched. I was really good on defense my junior year, and then my senior year, like we switched game fields, and I don't like to make I don't like to really make excuses for myself, but though it was hard for me making the adjustment from a different field, and I really struggled on defense, and I also was really struggling hitting. I was hitting like 220 after our first like four series, and I was just like, geez, like I'm just like rocky season, and I got benched, and the thing I always told myself is like I'm not here for myself, like I'm here for my teammates, and like I'm a leader of this team, like I was a captain for 2 years. And it's like, this is what a captain does when he fails. So I was like, I'm going to show up to practice. I'm going to do my work. I'm going to like still lead by example, do everything I can. Because when my number is called again, like I got to come through for the boys. And the, the first opportunity I had after that, after kind of being off and on the bench was I came into a game against our rivals. We were down like 11-2 and I let off I came to pinch hit, first hit, line drive hit. My second at bat was a 3-run home run. Like that was my first home run ever. And it came because I sat the bench the whole game. And just like stuff like that was very rewarding for me. Like the guy who played in front of me was a true freshman at the time, and now I'm his coach. And I always told him, like no matter like if you're playing in front of me or I'm playing in front of you, like I'm gonna support you and I'm gonna be here to push you, but also to help lead you because I know like I would want the same from you. So being like that good example and being a good teammate, I think that like goes a long way for them.
Yeah, awesome, man. It's kind of a servant leadership kind of answer too, where it's less about you and more about how can you serve others around you. And I think that was really good. So I do want to kind of get into you mentioned you trained at Driveline and kind of that the reason that we're on this podcast together right now. So
Yeah.
we had actually I texted Watson today and he actually had a question. Um, so here we go.
Nice.
What
Love it.
yeah, so what the culture of the training floor at Driveline taught you and what impact you felt like you could make on that environment.
Mm. So I think that was probably one of the biggest things I loved about training was the culture on the training floor. Like I really liked that, everybody kind of was just getting after it and everybody was there for the same reason. It was like everybody wanted to be better, but we also knew that getting better is really hard. So every day is like we're just all like collectively just getting diced up and you just kind of just gotta eat it. And like no one likes to see the guy who like makes excuses and stuff like that. Like I think it really taught us all how to be like humble within our failures. Like if you're struggling, it's like dang, like man, I just hit the mixed pitch I pitch machine and I went like 1 for 10 on barrels and it's like don't worry bro, so did I. Like it's okay, like what are we gonna do from there? So I think one thing that I learned is like instilling like confidence in the players to fail. That was a big thing for me because and now as a coach, like I took a lot of the things I learned from the training floor to my coaching style. I like to challenge our players, make the environment a little bit harder, just so that I know that the skills they're learning will transfer. But it was also like being able to help them like within those struggles. Like I'm like there, so if they're struggling, I'll ask them questions or they can ask me stuff, and just learning how to communicate with the players. I think that's a big thing I learned from the coaching staff at Driveline. Like all the trainers there, like they're so good at communicating with me as like a player to coach relationship that. I think those are skills that I took with me like now as a coach as well.
Yeah, I mean, from just talking to him and knowing him for a few years, it's a special place, right? And the big thing that I've taken away from my conversations with people who have been there is that the environment really dictates how much better you're going to get.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I've really tried to take into my coaching too, is just you got to make it harder than it's going to be when the lights come on, and understanding that there's nobody out you to help there or out there to help you when the lights do come on. So um, some good insight there, and that kind of ties into my next question. Your experience there, you obviously talked about it a little bit, but how does that then, and you maybe have mentioned this already, but how does that maybe influence the way you coach your players now?
Yeah, so for my coaching style, like I think coaching kind of came naturally to me because I coached myself kind of like well, so
Hmm.
I was also that guy, like, so I was one of the first guys, if not the first guy, to bring out like weighted balls and like weighted bats to practice. And guys be like, why are you doing that? It's like, because I believe it's going to help. And then explain to them why. Like, I had a very like regimented routine. And if not, like, I would always tinker and try to solve new things. And people would tell me, like, oh, you're just like overthinking it. It's like, you just got to go up there and hit. It's like, yeah, dude, I've tried that for the past 19 years of my life. And look where it got me. It's like, I can't do that. Like, it does not work for me. Like, I wish, like, I'm grateful that that works for some guys because you don't got to deal with what I got to deal with, but this is
Yeah.
the path that I got to take. So, just knowing how I got better, especially like objectively using data, using the the stuff that I learned from Driveline, especially, and also like on my own. I think it really influenced the way that I coach because I know how hard it is to really get better. Like I know how much work it took me, but I also understand like everybody's a little different. So a lot of the way that I like to coach is I like to see what they struggle with, put them in an environment to figure it out, and then let them just go figure it out. And then if they have questions, like we talk about it. But one thing that I learned too that really helps with coaching, and it's not necessarily like the stuff you do, but it's the players knowing that you're bought in. Like half of my players are my former teammates. They're my friends. You know, these are the guys that
Mhm.
I went to war with on the field, and like we grinded it out. We've spent time on and off the field together, and throughout my time as a player, like I was always more of like a player mentor in a way because of like my course through college baseball. Like I knew what it was like. I know what it's like to be the red shirt. I know what it's like to be the bench player. I know what it's like to be like the guy. Like I've experienced it all. So having that relationship with all of them has really helped make coaching a little bit easier for me. Like I feel like I just turned 24, and then when my coach hired me, he's like, look, like you're gonna run the hit and you're gonna do all these different things. And part of me is just like, dang, like thanks for trusting me, but I'm gonna do my best. I
Yeah.
promise I'll do my best, but like I always feel like I have more to learn. So yeah, I definitely think my experience at Driveline, that's kind of where it all started. Um with my coaching style. And I'm really like I'm always following their stuff, like always trying to learn more from them. And I'm always grateful
Mhm.
like that whenever I need something, they're always open for communication. Like they're always there.
Yeah, and I think there's so much value in just like having to find a way to get it together on your own. Like I I mean, I don't know if I was necessarily the same way. I pitched mostly pretty much all 4 years, but like there was something in me that was always like, man, there's something more. There's something more that I have to kind of put it all together, um and I think a lot of coaches want to do a little too much. And I think, especially today too, and I talked about this on the last episode with my good buddy, but um, it's like these kids want to have everything like given to, they want to have all the information,
Yeah.
from an expert, and like how to do this the best way. And um, I personally don't think that's the best way. And sometimes it might come across as like, they feel like I'm not communicating enough with them or I'm not giving them enough. But in reality, I think it is ultimately if they can figure it out themselves, they're going to get way more out of themselves in the long run. And um, it sounds kind of like that's a little bit of your philosophy. I hope I'm not off on that, but
Oh no, yeah, 100%.
yeah.
Like the biggest thing I check myself with is making sure I don't overload my players because I'm definitely more of like I have to think very objectively and think very like specifically. I need to know exactly how I was moving, and I know how to put the thoughts together. Whereas some guys they can't. Like you gotta keep it simple, give them one cue, one focus, and let them go do it. Um, but I also do agree, like I think it's more so like at the younger levels now, with the youth. 'Cause I train kids on the side as well at a local hitting facility.
Mhm.
So one thing I've learned is a lot of kids, yeah, like they compare a lot to like others, and it's hard, social media age. Um, but one thing I asked a lot of the guys is like, hey, like, have you just like tried a little harder? Like, do you think you've tried your best? Like honestly, because for me, like that was, in my opinion, that's the only reason I made it as far as I did. Is like I wasn't lying when I said like 5 to 6 days a week for 11 years of my life. Like
Mhm.
I did everything I could. Like I got into college at a buck 40, and I graduated like 195 pounds. Like I hit the weight room. I ate. I did like I tried to take care of every single variable possible to make myself the best player. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of guys don't realize like there's so much more in the tank if you just take care of like those little things. But those little things can be hard. It's definitely
Yeah.
challenging. But I know I did it for myself, and that way I'm asking it from them, and I'm not just like like saying it to say it. It's like, bro, like I did it, and it
You
helped
lived
me.
it.
So
Yeah.
I hope it can help you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm gonna do is we're almost out of time on this Zoom, so I'm gonna send you another invite. Are you good for another 20-ish
Oh
so
yeah, I
minutes?
got time.
Okay.
I'm
All right.
chilling. Yeah.
So perfect. This is gonna I'm gonna have to download this. It'll take 5 minutes or so. But then I'll send you that new link right away and then we'll pick up where we left off. Is that cool?
Yep. Sounds good, man.
All right, thanks.
Yep.